The night of Adana's wedding started with joy. The whole village gathered, eating roasted goats, drinking palm wine, and dancing to the heavy sound of drums. The air was full of laughter, and even the elders nodded in approval as the young ones celebrated. But you know how sometimes happiness can turn sour in just a moment? That was how it happened. The wind changed. It came suddenly, strong and cold, carrying a smell that no wedding should ever have. The sharp, choking smell of rotten flesh. The drummers stopped without warning. Their sticks dropped, not by choice, but as if their hands had gone weak. The fire from the torches shook violently, some going out, leaving parts of the square in thick darkness. People began to whisper, their voices low, asking each other what was happening. Then from the forest path, they appeared. At first, it looked like a group of people walking in a line, coming late to join the party. Some laughed nervously, thinking it was a masquerade performance. But the laughter died quickly. These were not masquerades. These were not men. Their skins were pale and dry, their eyes hollow, their bodies wrapped in burial clothes. And the smell told the truth. These were the dead. Fear spread fast. Mothers held their children close. Some men stepped back, their feet unsteady. The bride, Adana, stood frozen where she was, her calabash slipping from her hands, spilling palm wine into the dust. She could not breathe. She could not speak. Her eyes were fixed on one figure among the dead, her brother, the same brother who had been buried 2 years ago. His mouth moved, and in that broken voice, she heard her name, Adana. You can imagine the confusion. One child screamed, pointing into the line of corpses, "Mama, see Grandpa! But Grandpa is dead!" The mother pulled the boy close, her body shaking as she too recognized the face. The villagers gasped as they began to see their own relatives among the dead. Fathers, mothers, brothers, wives, all moving together in silence, their feet dragging yet making no sound. Then something worse happened. The drums, which had been silent, started again. Nobody was playing them. The drummers had already run, yet the sound returned, slow and heavy, like a heartbeat under the ground. Thud, thud, thud. Each strike made the ground tremble under their feet. People wanted to run, but fear held their legs like chains. The dead stopped at the edge of the square. They lifted their heads as one, and their mouths opened. What came out was not a normal voice. It was many voices together, thick and deep, like coffins opening, like soil being poured in graves. "We have come," they said, their words rolling through the night. The villagers covered their ears, but the sound still entered their hearts. "We have come for the wedding feast." Silence followed, a silence so heavy it felt like even the air was afraid to move. And in that silence, the villagers finally knew this was no wedding night. This was the night the dead had chosen to eat with the living. Nobody moved. The villagers just stood there staring at the dead, who now filled the edge of the square. You could hear the sound of teeth grinding, not from the living, but from the skulls of the corpses as their jaws clicked open and shut. It was like bones arguing with themselves. The bride's father tried to stand tall, but even he was shaking. "Who are you people?" he shouted, his voice trembling, though he already knew the answer. One of the corpses stepped forward. His head was bent, his eyes empty. But when the torchlight touched his face, the crowd screamed. It was El Daozo, the man who had been buried only last planting season. His voice was broken, like two stones scratching against each other. "We are the ones you buried," he said. "We are the ones you forgot." The women wailed and covered their faces. Men staggered backward. Some tried to run, but the gate of the square slammed shut on its own, as if an unseen hand had locked them in. Panic rose. People pressed against each other, whispering prayers, calling on ancestors, but no help came. The drums kept beating by themselves, louder now, echoing through every chest. Adanna, the bride, was shivering, her white clothes shaking on her body. Her eyes were fixed on her brother's corpse. He was looking at her with a hunger that made her blood run cold. She whispered, "Why have you come?" But the answer came not from him alone, but from all of them together. "We have come to eat what belongs to us." The villagers looked at one another in confusion. Eat what belongs to them? What did that mean? The dead began to move closer, slowly, step by step. The earth groaned with each step they took, and the torches burned weaker. A baby began to cry in silence. One of the corpses turned its head toward the baby, and the mother screamed, clutching her child tight. By now, the villagers were trembling. Some men whispered that it was a curse. Others said someone must have offended the ancestors, maybe even the bride or the groom. But no one had the courage to speak louder. No one wanted to be noticed by the dead. And then, as if to answer their fears, the corpses stretched out their hands together and pointed, not at the villagers, not at the elders, but at Adanna, the bride. "The feast begins with her," they said. The moment the dead pointed at Adanna, the whole square broke into confusion. Women screamed. Some fainted. Men tried to grab their wives and children, but still, the gates of the square would not open. It was as if invisible hands held it shut. The drummers were gone, yet the drums kept speaking by themselves, beating louder and faster, like a heart about to burst. Adanna's leg grew weak. Her husband-to-be, Chike, held her hand tight, pulling her behind him, trying to protect her. "Leave her alone," he shouted, his voice cracking with fear. But the corpses only laughed, a dry, cracking laugh that sounded like wood burning in fire. One of them, an old woman with empty sockets where eyes should be, spoke. "You cannot stop us. She is ours." The villagers began to murmur, asking, "Why Adanna? What has she done?" But nobody knew. Some whispered it must be her family's fault. Others said maybe her marriage had angered the ancestors. Fingers pointed, accusations rose, but no answer came. The corpses kept moving closer, their steps slow but sure, their shadows stretching long across the ground. Adanna cried out, "Brother, why are you here? What do you want from me? Our brother's corpse stepped forward, his lips breaking apart as he spoke. Adanna, the living think they can celebrate while the dead starve. But every feast must be shared, and tonight it begins with you. The words made the crowd shiver. The elders tried to chant protective prayers, calling on the spirits of the land, but their voices shook too much to carry power. One torch suddenly went out on its own, then another, until only 2 weak flames remained. The square was now almost in total darkness. Chike pulled Adanna to his chest, whispering, I will not let them take you. But his courage was already failing. The cold air pressed against them like a wall, making it hard to breathe. Adanna's mother wailed loudly, begging the dead to have mercy, but her cries only echoed back, unanswered. The corpses now stood less than 10 steps away, their hands reaching out, their hollow eyes fixed on the bride. The villagers could only watch in silence, their fear stronger than their will to fight. And then, as the drums thundered one more heavy beat, the dead spoke again in one chilling voice. Bring her to us, and we will leave you in peace. The words of the dead shook the square like thunder. Bring her to us, and we will leave you in peace. The villagers froze, their eyes darting from one another to the bride. Nobody dared speak first, but the fear in their hearts was clear. If giving Adanna would save them, some were already thinking it. Others shook their heads, whispering that to hand her over would bring a curse worse than death. Adanna's mother fell to her knees, clutching her wrapper, begging the corpses with trembling hands. Please, she is my only daughter. Leave her. Take me instead. But the dead did not even look at her. Their empty eyes stayed fixed on the bride, as if no other soul existed. Chike, holding Adanna tight, shouted again, his voice louder than the first time. You cannot take her. You will have to pass through me first. His courage sparked for a moment, but deep inside he knew, how can a man fight what has already died? The elders gathered quickly in a corner, their voices low, arguing. Some said, we must protect her. She is the bride of the night. The spirit should not touch her. Others said, if we refuse, they will destroy all of us. Better for one to suffer than the whole village. The quarrel grew, but fear silenced them again. When the corpses took another step forward, their bones creaking like dry wood breaking. Then one villager, a thin man known for his sharp tongue, pointed at Adanna and shouted, give her to them. If we don't, none of us will see tomorrow. None of us will see tomorrow. Gasps filled the air. Adanna's mother screamed at him to shut up, but his words had already planted seeds of fear. People began to move away from the bride, slowly creating space around her. Even friends who had danced with her earlier in the night stepped back, their faces filled with shame and terror. Adanna clung to Chike, her tears soaking his wrapper. Please, don't let them take me, she whispered, her voice breaking. Chike's grip tightened, but his own body trembled. The weight of every eye in the square pressed on him. Could he protect her? Could anyone? The corpses, seeing the villagers' fear, raised their hands again. This time, their voices were louder, stronger, like a command that could not be ignored. Bring her now! The ground shook as they spoke, and the last two torches went out, leaving the wedding square in darkness so thick it swallowed everything. Only the faint glow in the eyes of the dead remained, and in that darkness, the choice became clear: save the bride or save the village. The square was silent except for the drums that beat themselves, heavy and slow. Then the thin man who had shouted earlier stepped forward again, pointing at Adanna. "She is the one they want. If we delay, all of us will die here tonight." His voice shook, but his eyes burned with desperation. Some villagers nodded in agreement. Others shouted at him to keep quiet. But the fear in the air was too strong. A group of young men, trembling, began to move closer to Chike and Adanna. Chike raised his fist, shouting, "Touch her, and I will fight you!" But his voice was swallowed by the growl of the corpses. Adanna clung to him, crying, "They want me, not you. If you fight them, you will die." Still, Chike shook his head, refusing to let go. The corpses stood watching, their hollow eyes glowing, waiting to see if the living would hand her over themselves. The elders rose, their staffs shaking as they stood in a circle. "We must decide now," said the oldest among them. "If we give her, the dead may go. If we refuse, all our children may join them." His words fell heavy like stones. Adanna's mother screamed at them, "You call yourselves elders? You will sell my daughter to the grave?" But none of them could answer her. Fear had stolen their tongues. Another elder, his voice thick with dread, said, "If we sacrifice one, many will live. This is wisdom, not wickedness." But the villagers muttered, some agreeing, others disagreeing, until their whispers rose like fire. Chike shouted at them, "If they betray her, you betray us all. Today it is Adanna, tomorrow it will be your daughters." The crowd trembled, torn in two, between fear of death and fear of shame. Suddenly, Adanna stopped crying. She stood, her eyes red, her body shaking, but her voice strong. "If they want me, let them take me. But I will not walk to them myself. They must come for me." Her words silenced the crowd. Even the corpses paused, their heads tilting as if listening. Chike held her hand, refusing to let go. "No, you will not go. I swore to protect you." Adanna looked at him with tears. "And if you die trying, will that save me? Will it save the village?" The villagers watched, their hearts breaking at her bravery. But the corpses began to move again, their slow, heavy steps pressing into the ground. They were coming for her, no matter what. The wedding feast had already been claimed. One of the elders, desperate, shouted, "Bring fire! Surround her with fire!" Quickly, men grabbed burning sticks from the dying torches and planted them around Adanna and Chike. A cycle of flames lit up in the darkness. For a moment, hope returned. The corpses stopped at the edge, staring into the fire, their hollow eyes glowing brighter. "Maybe they fear fire," whispered the woman. But the relief was short. The corpses stepped forward again, and to everyone's horror, the flames bent away from them, shrinking as though bowing in respect. Within seconds, the fire burned weaker, smoke rising into the night. The villagers gasped in terror. Fire itself had no power against the dead. Then a strange sound filled the square. Not the drums this time, but a voice, deep, old and commanding. It came from the direction of the shrine. Everyone one turned, and there stood the chief priest, his eyes glowing white, his body trembling as he raised the staff. "You dare to come to this place uninvited?" he shouted at the dead. His voice was strong, carrying across the square. For the first time, the corpses paused, their heads turning towards him. "Go back to your graves," the priest commanded. But the corpses laughed, a sound like bones rattling in a gourd. "You fed us lies," they said. "You poured libations, but kept the meat for yourself. We have come to collect what is owed." The villagers gasped. Were the dead accusing the living of cheating them? The corpses now stepped closer, ignoring the priest's commands. Their voices rose together, filling the night. "We are hungry. We are thirsty. We will eat tonight." The villagers screamed and scattered, pressing against the locked gate, some clawing at it with bleeding hands. Mothers hid their children under mats. Men shouted in fear, but nobody could escape. Chike held Adanna tight, his body shaking, while the priest raised the staff again, chanting louder, sweat pouring down his face. But each word he spoke only made the corpses laugh harder. "The feast begins," they growled. And then one corpse, tall and strong, reached forward with a hand as cold as stone, stretching towards Adanna's veil. The night had turned into a trap, and there was no safe corner left in the square. The air inside the village square was heavy, like a room where someone had just died. The torches flickered weakly, smoke curling into the night, as if even fire was afraid of what stood before them. The corpses no longer moved like mindless shadows. They stood in rows, watching, waiting, their empty sockets glowing faintly, their heads tilting left and right like vultures cycling meat. The crowd pressed against the wooden gate, children crying, women screaming, men shouting at the top of their lungs. But the gate refused to open. It was as if some invisible hand had locked it shut. Adanna could hardly breathe. She felt her heart beating like a drum inside her chest. The tall corpse, the one whose cold hand had reached her veil, took another step forward, its rotten toes dragging against the ground. Then suddenly, it spoke. Its voice was hoarse, broken and deep, but the words were clear. "Adanna." The sound froze everyone. The villagers stopped crying. Even the priest's chant tumbled on his lips. Adanna's name rolled out of the corpse. "Adanna." This time, it stretched its hand toward her, pointing straight at her chest. She screamed and clung to Chike. "It knows me," she cried. "Chike, it knows my name." The crowd broke into whispers. How can a corpse know her name? Has she done something? Is she cursed? Their voices carried fear, suspicion, and anger. Adanna looked around desperately. "I have done nothing, I swear." But their eyes had already begun to shift. Fear does not reason, it blames. And now, the blame was pointing at the bride. Chike stood in front of her like a wall. "If you touch her, you will fight me first," he roared. But his words felt small compared to the sound that came next. One by one, the corpses began to murmur her name. "Adanna, Adanna, Adanna." Their broken voices rose together like a chant, echoing around the square. It was like hearing the entire graveyard calling at once. Some villagers covered their ears, others fell to the ground shaking. The sound was unbearable. The chief priest gripped his staff tighter and shouted at the corpses, "Leave this place! She's not yours to take!" But the corpses only laughed, a deep rattling sound that made the skin crawl. One corpse, her face half gone, stepped forward and said, "We know her blood. Her blood was promised." The square erupted in noise. People shouted, some accusing her family, others begging the priest to explain. Adanna's mother wailed, "Promised? Who promised her? Tell us!" The priest's face turned pale. His lips moved, but no words came out. The villagers rushed toward him, demanding answers. But before he could speak, a strong wind swept through the square. It carried the stench of graves, sharp and bitter, forcing everyone to cover their noses. The corpses raised their heads to the sky, as if inhaling the wind like sweet perfume. Then, without warning, one corpse broke away from the group. It was smaller, bent, with bones sticking out of its hands. It crawled closer on its hands and legs, its empty sockets fixed on Adanna. She screamed as it dragged itself toward the dusty ground. The sound of bones scraping against sand, piercing the air. Chike picked up a heavy stone and hurled it. The stone cracked against the corpse's skull, but instead of falling, it only laughed. The hollow sound of its laughter filled everyone with dread. "Do you see now?" The thin man from earlier shouted. "She is the one they want. If we don't give her, none of us will live here alive." He pointed at Adanna, and several villagers began to murmur in agreement. Fear was pushing them forward. Adanna fell to her knees, crying, "Please, believe me. I don't know why they are calling me." But even as she spoke, the corpses continued their chants. "Adanna, Adanna." Her name rolled like thunder in the night. The chief priest finally shouted, "Silence!" His voice cracked with desperation. He turned to the crowd and said, "There is a secret you must know. Many years ago, before Adanna was born, her father made a covenant. He went to the shrine of the earth, begging for wealth and children. He poured libations, he killed goats, and he swore an oath. He promised that the first daughter of his bloodline would be given to the ancestors on our wedding night." The villagers gasped in horror. Adanna's mother collapsed to the ground, wailing like a mad woman. Chike's grip on Adanna tightened, his face dark with shock. Adanna shook her head violently, crying, "It's a lie! It's a lie! My father would never!" But deep inside, something twisted in her chest. Her father had died when she was still a child. Would it be true that he had traded her life for his riches? The priest's voice shook. "The dead have come to collect their bride. That is why they are here." His words fell like stones in water. The crowd roared in fear and anger. Some shouted, "Give her to them!" Others screamed, "No, she is innocent!" The square was breaking apart, the villagers turning on one another. And through it all, the corpses stood waiting, their chants never stopping, their voices growing louder, hungrier, closer. "Adanna, Adanna, Adanna." The night had chosen its bride, and the dead were not ready to live without her. The village square was no longer filled with celebration. The drums had stopped, the dancers had scattered, and the air was now heavy with the weight of fear and betrayal. The corpses still stood in rows, their empty sockets glowing faintly, their mouths opening and closing as they chanted Adana's name like a cursed prayer. Adana, Adana, Adana. The villagers could no longer ignore the truth the priest had spoken. If her father had indeed promised her to the dead, then tonight was the night they had come to claim their payment. Women clutched their children tightly, pulling them away from the center. Men whispered among themselves, their faces dark with suspicion and desperation. Some looked at Adana with pity, others with anger, but most with the kind of fear that makes men do wicked things. Chike held Adana close, shielding her from their eyes, but he could feel the shift in the air. The same people who had been laughing and dancing at their wedding moments ago were now looking at his bride like she was a curse that must be removed. The thin man, the same one who had shouted before, stepped forward again. His voice was sharp, carrying over the whispers. You have all heard it. The priest has spoken. Her blood was promised to the dead. If we keep her here, we are all finished. Do you not hear their chant? Do you not smell the grave in the air? They will not leave until she follows them. Some villagers shouted in agreement. Yes, give her to them before they take us all. Others screamed back. No, she is one of us. We cannot sacrifice her. The square erupted into chaos, voices rising, fear thickening like smoke. Adana fell to her knees, her tears wetting the dust. Please, I did not choose this. I did not ask for this. I am not their bride. Her words broke into sobs, but the villagers' hearts were hard. Fear had already started to blind them. Chike lifted her back to her feet and shouted at the crowd, if any of you dare touch her, I will fight you with my last breath. His eyes burned with rage, but the villagers were many, and he was only one man with his trembling bride. The chief priest raised the staff and banged it toward the ground. Silence! His voice cracked like thunder. But the people were no longer listening to him. Fear had swallowed reason. The priest tried again, his voice trembling. The covenant was made by her father, not by her. If you hand her over, you will be guilty of blood, and blood never leaves a land without curse. But the crowd's anger only grew. Suddenly, an old woman in a torn wrapper staggered forward, her face wrinkled like dry leather. Her eyes were red from tears. She pointed at Adana and shouted, I lost my son 2 years ago. Buried him in the ground with my own hands. Now he's standing here among the corpses. She raised her hand toward one of the dead who stood at the edge of the crowd. True enough, a young man's body, his face half rotten but still recognizable, stared blankly ahead. If the dead want her, let them take her. I will not lose anyone else tonight. The crowd roared in agreement. Adana screamed, Mama, please, I am not the cause. But her voice was swallowed by the chant of the villagers. They surged forward, pushing against Chike, their eyes wild. Chike swung his fist, throwing men to the ground. But they came in numbers. Hands grabbed Adana's veil, tearing at her wrapper, pulling her away from her husband. She screamed and kicked, but their grip was strong. The corpses watched silently, their chants never stopping. Adana, Adana, Their hollow voices were the only rhythm guiding the madness. The priest rushed forward, trying to block the villagers. "Stop this madness! Do not hand her over! You will doom us all!" But one of the men shoved him aside, and he fell to the ground, his staff rolling away in the dust. The people no longer feared the gods, no longer cared about curses. They only wanted to survive the night, even if it meant offering their bride to the grave. Chike roared, his voice hoarse. "Leave her! Leave my wife!" He fought like a cornered lion, but he was outnumbered. His lips split, blood pouring down his chin. Yet, he refused to let go of Adanna's hand. Adanna screamed his name as they tried to drag her from him. Her heart pounded in her chest like it would explode. She could feel the cold presence of the corpses pressing closer. And then something strange happened. One of the corpses, the tall one who had first spoken her name, stepped forward and raised its hands. The villagers froze instantly as if controlled by an unseen force. Their grip loosened, and Adanna stumbled back into Chike's arms. The corpses stopped chanting, and for the first time, silence fell across the square. Every living soul held their breath. Then the tall corpse pointed at the villagers, its jaw cracking open. Its voice rumbled like thunder from a cave. "You betray your own blood for fear? Then you are not better than the dead." The villagers collapsed to their knees, some screaming, some covering their ears. Adanna buried her face in Chike's chest, trembling. The corpses had stopped being just watchers. Now they had started to judge. The night was no longer about a wedding feast. It had become a trial. One where the living and the dead stood side by side, and the bride was at the center of it all. The villagers trembled when they knelt. None of them had ever seen the dead act with such authority. The tall corpse, its bones showing through torn flesh, pointed again, and a deep groan rolled out of its chest. "The covenant was made, but you tried to trade her like yam in the market. You are not clean." Its empty eyes burned into the crowd. Adanna clutched Chike tightly. She whispered through tears, "Why are you punishing the others? I am the one they came for." Chike shook his head. "No, my love, they came for blood, but they also came for truth. He has exposed the wicked hearts of our people." The priest rose slowly, his hands trembling. "Spirits of the grave, hear me. We are weak mortals. Forgive them, for fear has blinded them. Leave Adanna, she is innocent." The corpse hissed, a sound like dried leaves burning. It shook its head. "Innocent? Her blood was promised. She is ours. Yet now, your fear has called us to more than one judgment." Suddenly, 3 villagers collapsed to the ground, choking. Their mouths filled with black soil, their eyes rolling back as if something was sucking the life from them. The others screamed and tried to run, but their legs grew heavy, as though chains were dragging them back. Adanna cried out, "Stop, please, take me if you want, but leave them." She fell on her knees before the corpses. Chike tried to pull her up, but she refused to rise. "Let me speak with them. Maybe they will listen to me." The tall corpse bent low, its face inches from hers. The stench of rot made her gag, but she did not look away. "You would give yourself for them?" it asked. Adanna nodded, her tears soaking the ground. "Yes, my death will save them. I am ready. For the first time, silence fell heavy, broken only by the cries of frightened villagers. The corpse tilted its head slowly, studying her like one studies a goat at slaughter. Then it turned and stretched its arm toward the horizon. The other corpses shifted, their heads twisting unnaturally. They seemed to wait for a signal. Finally, the tall one spoke again, its voice low and final. It's not yet time, but soon, the ground will open and the feast will begin. The corpses stepped back into the darkness, their shapes fading like smoke. But the villagers knew the words were a warning. They had not left for good. That night, no one slept. The villagers did not sleep that night. Even the crickets were silent, as if they too were afraid of what had visited the square. Mothers held their children close. Fathers kept their cutlasses near, but no one had the courage to walk outside. Only the moon peeped through the clouds, throwing pale light over the empty streets. Adana sat inside her father's hut, her face pale. Chike stayed by her side, holding her hand like he would never let go. The priest sat in the corner, muttering prayers under his breath, sweat dripping down his face. Then suddenly, a strange sound echoed from the forest, a chorus of whispers, soft at first, then louder, circling the village like wind. "Do you hear that?" Adana asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Chike nodded, his heart pounding. The whispers were not normal. They carried words, clear words. The feast, the feast, prepare the feast. The priest stood up quickly. They are speaking from the land of the dead. They are not gone. They are still here watching us. His voice shook and he grabbed his staff tightly. Outside, dogs began barking wildly. Then suddenly they went silent, one after the other. A baby cried, then stopped suddenly, as though someone had pressed a hand over its mouth. Adana jumped. "What if they come back now?" she asked. Chike pulled her closer. "I will protect you, even if it means my life." But before he could say more, a loud knock thundered on the door. Knock, knock, knock. 3 times, slow and heavy. The whole hut shook with each hit. Everyone froze. No one moved to open it. The priest shouted, "Who is there? Speak, or may fire consume you." There was silence. Then a faint voice answered from outside. A voice everyone recognized, but knew should not be speaking. It was Adana's dead brother. "Sister, open the door. They are waiting for you. We must finish what was started." Adana screamed and covered her ears. Chike rushed to block the door, holding it with all his strength. But the wood began to crack, as if unseen hands were pushing from outside. The priest lifted his staff and pressed it against the door, chanting quickly. The pressure stopped. The whispers faded, but the warning remained heavy in their minds. The dead were not finished. When morning came, the village was restless. People gathered at the square, whispering about what had happened. Some blamed Adana, some blamed the priest, and others blamed the whole community for hiding sins. The elders sat in silence, their eyes heavy with fear. Adana stood before them with Chike, her hand shaking. "They will not stop," she said. "They want a feast, and they will return for it." One elder shouted, "They let just give them what they want. Sacrifice her and this matter will end. The crowd gasped. Chike jumped forward. Over my dead body. She will not die for your fear. The priest raised his hand. Silence! His eyes burned as he looked at the elder. You speak like a coward. You think the dead can be bribed with one life? They are calling for judgment on all of us. The villagers murmured nervously. Someone whispered, but priest, why are they coming now? Why not years ago? The priest's face darkened. He turned away, but Adana stepped forward. Tell us the truth. You know something, don't you? At first, he said nothing. Then he sighed deeply. Long ago, when I was young, this village made a covenant. We sacrifice the maiden to the spirits every 20 years to keep the dead in their graves. But the last covenant was broken. I refused to continue it. The crowd gasped again. You what? An elder shouted. Yes. The priest said firmly, I ended the blood covenant. I thought the gods of heaven would protect us, but the angry dead have awakened, demanding what is owed. They want their feast. Adana felt her knees grow weak. So it is true. I am the sacrifice they want. The priest shook his head. No, they want more. They want all of us. The news of the broken covenant spread like wildfire. Some villagers turned against the priests, shouting that his stubbornness had brought doom on them. Others blamed the elders for agreeing to such wicked sacrifices in the first place. The square became a grave of shouting, curses, and fear. But while they argued, the sky began to change. Clouds gathered faster than anyone had ever seen before. The sun disappeared behind a black sheet, and the air became heavy, as if the ground itself was holding its breath. Goats bleated, chickens scattered, and children clung to their mothers' wrappers. Then came the thunder. Not normal thunder. This one sounded like drumming, deep, heavy drumming that shook the hearts of everyone. It was the same rhythm heard at funerals, the rhythm of the dead. The villagers froze. Adana grabbed Chike's hand. They are calling again, she whispered. The wedding feast, they will come tonight. The priest raised the staff. We must prepare. Everyone, return to your huts. Gather salt, palm oil, and firewood. If they enter our homes, we must resist. But one old man shouted, resist? How do you fight people who are already dead? You have killed us all. He spat on the ground and ran off. Others followed him, scattering like ants after rain. Chike pulled Adana aside. If they are truly coming, we cannot stay here. They will not rest until they drag you away. Then where will we go? She asked, trembling. Before Chike could answer, another sound cut through the air. It was laughter. Low, cold laughter that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Even the trees seemed to laugh. The wind carried the sound into every ear. The priest dropped to his knees. They are closer than I thought. The night will not end without blood. Night came faster than expected. It was as if the sun had been swallowed. The villagers lit fires, but the flames flickered weakly, as though afraid of the darkness. The drumming continued, steady and mocking. Adana and Chike stayed with the priest inside the shrine, where a sacred fire burned. The priest drew strange symbols on the ground with white chalks, his face grim. Stay inside the cycle, he ordered. If you step out, they will see you. Suddenly, a knock echoed at the shrine's door. Knock, knock, knock. The slow rhythm from before. Chike grabbed a machete, his knuckles white. If they enter, I will fight, he said. But the priest shook his head. You cannot cut shadows. The door creaked open by itself. Cold air rushed in, smelling of decay and old graves. Then the shadows appeared, tall, thin, figures with hollow eyes, slipping through the door like smoke. Their faces were familiar. The dead villagers, men and women buried years ago, now walking again. One of them stepped forward. It was Adana's brother, his clothes still stained with the dust of his grave. His voice was soft, almost kind. Sister, why do you hide? Come, they are waiting for you. The wedding feast cannot begin without the bride. Adana screamed and clung to Chike. The priest lifted his staff and struck the ground. Fire shot up around the cycle, and the shadows hissed like snakes. They retreated, but did not leave. Instead, they cycled the shrine, whispering, "The bride must dance. The bride must eat. The bride must join us." Adana fell to her knees, sobbing. Chike held her tightly. The priest's face grew darker. They will not stop. They will stay until they break through. This night will be long. The whispers grew louder, and the fire protecting them grew weaker. The priest was sweating, his hands shaking as he tried to chant louder than the voices. But the shadows pressed closer, their hands reaching into the fire, ignoring the pain. Adana cried out, "We can't stay here, they will come in." Chike turned to the priest. "There must be another way out, tell us." The priest pointed to the back of the shrine. "There is a tunnel. It leads to the forest, but it is dangerous. No one has used it in years." Chike didn't wait. He pulled Adana towards it. The tunnel was small, dark, and smelled of bats, and it was better than waiting to be dragged into the night. They crawled through, hearing the shadows pounding on the shrine walls behind them. Halfway through, Adana felt something brush against her leg. She screamed. Chike turned back, swinging his machete wildly. Nothing, just darkness. But the whispers followed them into the tunnel. "You cannot run. The bride belongs to us. The feast is waiting." At last, they stumbled out into the forest. The moon glowed faintly through the trees, but the drumming was still there, echoing in their chests. Chike pulled Adana close. "We must keep moving. If we stop, they will find us." The priest crawled out behind them, coughing. "This forest is no safer," he said. "The dead know every path. But perhaps, just perhaps, the living gods will hear us here." The deeper they went into the forest, the stranger it became. The trees leaned closer, their branches twisting like arms. The ground was soft, like fresh graves, and every step sank deeper. Fireflies appeared, but their glow was not warm. Their light was cold, like the eyes of the dead. Adana stopped suddenly. "Do you see that?" she whispered. Ahead, glowing eyes shone between the trees. First 2, then 4, then dozens, watching them silently. Chike raised his machete, though his hand shook. "Stay behind me," he said. The priest whispered, "They are not animals, they are spirits. Don't provoke them. The eyes began to move closer. Out of the shadows came figures, half human, half shadow. They wore masks carved from skulls, and their hands carried bones as weapons. Their leader stepped forward and spoke in a deep, hollow voice. You have trespassed into the forest of eyes. No living soul enters here without giving something in return. Adana trembled. What do they want? She whispered. The leader pointed straight at her, the bride. Chike shouted, Never! He raised his machete, but the ground beneath him shifted. Roots shot up, wrapping around his legs, pulling him down. Adana screamed, trying to help him, but the spirits moved closer. The priest raised the staff, slamming it onto the earth. A burst of light shot out, scattering the spirits for a moment. Run! He shouted. Now! They ran, but the eyes followed, glowing brighter and brighter behind them. Breathless, they stumbled into a clearing where a wide river flowed. But the water was not clear. It was dark red, thick like blood, and the smell was foul. Adana covered her nose, gagging. What kind of river is this? The priest's face went pale. It is the river of blood. No living soul should cross it. But behind them, the glowing eyes were approaching fast. The whispers returned, louder than before. Bride, feast, come to us. Chike grabbed Adana's hand. We have no choice. Either we cross or they take you. The priest hesitated, then nodded. If we cross, we must not look back. No matter what we hear, no matter who calls our name, we must not turn. They stepped into the river. The cold gripped them like ice, and the water rose to their waists. Adana felt hands brushing against her leg beneath the surface, pulling, grabbing, trying to drag her under. She screamed. Voices called out from the water, familiar voices, her mother's, her brothers. Adana, come, stay with us. Tears filled her eyes. Mama, don't listen, Chike shouted, pulling her forward. They pushed on, every step a battle. The water thickened, rising to their chests, then their shoulders. The priest kept chanting, his voice trembling. Behind them, the spirits screamed in anger. At last, they reached the other side, collapsing on the muddy bank. But before they could breathe, a chilling sound echoed from the river. A voice deep and booming. The feast will not be denied. The rivers churned and something huge began to rise from its depths. The silence after the first bride's word was deafening. Adana gripped Chike's arm so tightly that her nails dug into his skin. Don't do it, she whispered. Don't give them what they want. But Chike's face was hard. His jaw clenched, and his eyes didn't leave the glowing skull of the first bride. If my life can save yours, then let it be so. The dead brides let out a low hiss of approval, their veils rustling like dry leaves. The first bride stretched out a skeletal hand toward Chike. Come forward, child of the living. Your blood will seal the feast. Adana's heart screamed inside her chest. Chike, please. Think of what you are saying. They tricked our fathers. And now they want to trick you too. But Chike took one step forward. The ground trembled. From the tomb, a faint red glow spread like fire, lighting up the carvings on the stone. The dead bride swayed, chanting in strange tongues. Adana fell to her knees, her tears falling onto the earth. She prayed silently, her lips shaking. God of heaven, if you are here, don't let them take it. Suddenly, a strong wind burst through the clearing, scattering leaves and ashes. The chanting stopped. The brides looked around, restless. The first bride eased, her hollow eyes narrowing. Something else had entered the tomb. From the shadows of the tomb, a figure emerged. Not skeletal, not dead, but a man in white robes, tall, his face hidden by a hood. His voice was deep and commanding. Enough! The dead bride shrank back. Even the first bride trembled slightly. You should not be here. The man in white ignored her. He turned to Chike and Adana. The covenant was built on lies. Blood cannot pay for blood forever. The feast must end tonight. Adana whispered, Who are you? The man's voice softened. A messenger sent to remind your people that the living should not bow to the grave. The first bride screeched, her voice shattering the silence. No! The covenant is ours. The living owe us. We were promised. The man in white lifted his hand, and light burst forth from his palm, burning the darkness. The dead brides screamed, covering their faces with their torn veils. But the first bride did not retreat. She pointed at Adana. Her blood is marked. She carries the bond. She cannot escape us. Chike stepped in front of Adana shouting, Then you will have to take me first. The man in white turned sharply. No, that is what they want. A willing sacrifice keeps the covenant alive. There is only one way to end this. Destroy the roots. The ground shook again, and the stone tomb split wider. Beneath it, something pulsed, dark, wet and alive. A heart. It was massive, beating slowly. Veins of fire crawling across the soil. Adana gasped, her stomach twisting. That is the root? The man in white nodded. Yes, the heart of the covenant, fed by every life they took. Destroy it and the dead will lose their hold. The first bride screeched, lunging forward with unnatural speed. No, you cannot touch it. The feast must continue. The skeletal bride swarmed, their veils whipping like snakes. Chike grabbed the falling staff from the ground, swinging wildly to keep them away. Adana fell back, her eyes locked on the pulsing act. The man in white shouted, Adana, you must strike it. Only the bride marked for the feast has the power to end it. Her body froze. Her hands shook. Me? I can't do it. Chike's voice cut through the chaos. Adana, look at me. You are stronger than them. End this for all of us. Tears blurred her vision, but she crawled forward, each heartbeat louder than the last. The dead bride shrieked, clawing at her. Chike fought them off, shouting her name again and again. The fourth bride leaped onto the tomb, her veil whipping around her like fire. Adana reached the ark. Her hands hovered above it, trembling. The man in white placed his hand on her shoulder. It is not your strength. It is your choice. Do you choose life or do you give them death? Adana clenched her teeth, lifted a sharp shard of stone from the ground, and with a cry that tore her throat, she plunged it into the heart. The ground exploded. Light burst from the heart, blinding, searing. The dead bodies screamed in agony, their bodies crumbling into ash. The first bride clawed at her face, shrieking, "No, we promised, we were." Her voice was cut off as she dissolved into dust. The pulsing heart cracked, black smoke pouring out. Then it shattered completely, its pieces sinking into the soil. Silence fell. Adana collapsed, panting, her body shaking uncontrollably. Chike rushed to her, holding her tightly. "It's over. It's over." But the man in white stood still, watching the tomb with grim eyes. "No, it has only just begun." The forest grew eerily quiet. The night breeze carried only the sound of rustling leaves. Adana clung to Chike, tears streaking her face. The man in white lowered his hood. His eyes glowed faintly. "You have broken the covenant. The dead will no longer feast on the living." Chike frowned. "Then it's finished?" The man shook his head slowly. "The hunger of the dead never ends. Tonight you destroyed their bond, but they will seek other ways to rise. If your people return to blood sacrifices, the feast will begin again." Adana whispered, "So what do we do now?" "Remember," the man said firmly, "teach your children. Tell them the truth. Never again must the living bow to the grave." He stepped back toward the tomb, and before their eyes, his body faded like smoke. Chike held Adana tighter. "We survived, Adana. We'll rebuild. No more shadows." But as they turned to leave, Adana glanced back at the ruins of the tomb. For a brief moment, she thought she saw a pale face watching her from the darkness, its hollow eyes fixed on her. Her heart skipped. She whispered, "Chike, what if it's not really over?" The night swallowed her words, and from deep within the earth, faintly, her heartbeats echoed once more. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this suspenseful story, drop a comment to encourage us share more. If you watched the story to the end, type your name on the comment section and we will make a shout out to you on our next story. Bye for now.